An Unlikely Story is an independent bookstore outside of Boston. It's owned by Jeff Kinney, best-selling author behind the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. Tonight he's asked 4 other children's book authors, Scieszka, Luen Yang, Jarrett, Krosoczka, and Jack Gantos, to join him there before an audience of librarians, teachers, parents, and kids. Children's literature expert Maria Salvador will lead the discussion about how to get boys reading more. The Stinky Cheese Man himself, Scieszka, gets the conversation started. He's the founder of an initiative called Guys Read.
Guys Read came out of my personal experience of growing up one with 5 brothers and no sisters. So it was just this raucous testosterone overload. And then I started teaching elementary school in New York, and I was in an all-women's world where suddenly, we were supposed to discuss our feelings instead of wrestling, which was very awkward for the first couple of faculty meetings. And I taught 2nd grade, and I saw my boys kind of falling out of reading. And it was just this weird thing. And then I did some research to find out boys have been behind on reading for all 28 years we've been testing them at every grade level, every year. So the thing we do is we test them again next year. We keep finding the same thing, but there's been no national program ever to even have the discussion. And actually, I'd like to start by saying probably what you guys already know, getting boys reading does not mean hating girls reading. Some people just freak out instantly, mostly 3rd grade girls, saying we read too. Yeah, I'm sorry, I know, I'm just trying to help everybody here. Because I think it's a global thing. We need everybody reading. And we need to engage these boys. So I just looked into it and found some research, a lot of research that says everything, which is even more confusing. But then just found some ways to reach boys. Like Jean said, I love that graphic novels have taken off. To give boys different forms, a much wider definition of what reading is. Let nonfiction be part of that. Let wordless books be part of that. Let audiobooks be part of that. And then what works for every reader, give them choice. Let them pick. And give them time to read. I mean, having been in a classroom, I know there's not much time. But I love that period of drop everything and read. That's the best thing we ever did. And we should do that always.
Luen Yang, who wrote American-Born Chinese, is the Library of Congress's current National Ambassador for Young People's Literature.
Every ambassador also picks a platform, so something that they want to focus on. And for me, the platform is Reading Without Walls, by which I mean I want to get kids to read outside of their comfort zones. I want them to explore the world through books. So I've been going around the country promoting what I call the Reading Without Walls challenge. And the way the challenge works is this. You set a due date for yourself. You can either do this as an individual or as a community, like a library community or a school community. Or a bookstore community. And by that due date, you just do one of 3 things. Number 1, you read a book about a character who doesn't look like you or live like you, somebody who's really different than you, at least on the surface level. Or number 2, you read a book about a topic that you don't know anything about, or you read a book about in a publishing format that you don't normally read for fun. So this can be a chapter book or a graphic novel, an audio book, a collection of poetry. If you really want to go for the gold star, you find a book that fits all 3 criteria. I have to tell you, I've been astounded by the amount of support that Reading Without Walls has gotten from librarians and teachers and bookstore owners. I get photos all the time of these beautiful displays that folks have put up. It's been really, really amazing. If you want more information, visit the readingwithoutwalls.com website. There's all sorts of downloadable material that you can use to run this with your kids.
What have you learned particularly about boys and reading during your travels?
Well, it could just be because I'm a cartoonist, but I meet a lot of boys who love comic books and graphic novels. I meet a lot of kids in general, but boys in particular seem to connect. Within my own work, they seem to connect really well with. I do work for a Nickelodeon property called Avatar: Last Airbender. Have you all heard of this? It's a show that ran on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008. How many of you have seen it? Have you all seen it? Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, you should feel a little bit ashamed. It's like an amazing show. It's like the best animated series that America has ever produced.
This is what happens with the metal. It goes right to your head.
Yeah, slightly ashamed. Not a lot, just slight shame. But it does seem like that. That's right. That.
Did you just plug watching TV?
I guess I kind of did. I guess I kind of did.
You just shame them for not watching enough television.
That's right. I guess I kind of did.
So what is your journal?
Yeah, so I do a graphic novel continuation of the series, and it does seem like for whatever reason there are fans of both genders for that property, absolutely. But it does seem like boys in particular gravitate towards that. It could be because it's really action based. It could also be because I think this appeals to both genders. I think there are a lot of complex human realities that are talked about in a very accessible way. Like that's just the way the world is constructed. It's been a ton of fun to work on. I also think that the fact that it's connected to something that moves is helpful. The fact that it's connected to animation is absolutely helpful.
5th grade has been important for a lot of you, particularly for you, Jack. You started keeping a journal in 5th grade, and you've recently written a journal, how to write. Tell us about what that has to do with reading and how writing and reading came together for you.
Boys do read, and they also want to write. Now, we all know that if you want to write well, it is the reading which is the nutrition for the writing. So you need to couple those things together. So if you're having a writing program in your classroom, you need to look at the books that the gentlemen up here have written and make sure you infuse those books and other books. But one of the things you might want to pay attention to is short pieces. Like all those guys read short stories that you've collected over the years. Oh, those are genius. Every guy that reads one of those goes, yeah, I can pretty much try and manage that and get to it. So we talk about where to get the stories and then how to write them, beginning, middle, and end, problem, action, solution, and everything in between. That's what the book is. The book is the book I wanted when I was a kid and didn't have. So I thought, well, I'll write one so the next kid will. Thank you.
So you have to be a reader in order to be a writer. Jarrett, were you a reader when you were a kid? And if you were, what made you that?
I didn't realize I was a reader. When you are a published children's book author, the second most frequently asked question is, what did you read when you were a kid? I mean, the first question is, how do you get your ideas? Second question you get all the time is, what did you love reading when you were a kid? And so for me, I always, even after the Lunch Lady graphic novels, were gaining in popularity, I would just go back to, these were three of my very favorite books, The Mouse and the Motorcycle by Beverly Cleary, and James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl, and Bunnicula by James Howe. And those were my favorite books, but that's not all I read. And it was after, digging deep into the archives of stuff that has survived over the years from childhood, from one box to one apartment to the other, I just found a stack of Garfield treasuries, and Peanuts treasuries and Calvin and Hobbes treasuries and two giant Tupperware bins of comics. And so every day my grandfather would come home from work and he would put the newspaper down on the kitchen table and I would just grab it and I would go Peanuts, Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes, and then like Doonesbury eventually. I was just still looking for
Mary
something.
Worth, of course.
Yes. Yeah. And my grandfather would give me a ride to the comic book store. I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, so he'd take me down Park Ave. We'd go to the comic book store. And in retrospect, he had to just sit in his car and he had his non-filtered Camel cigarette and his AM radio. Like he couldn't go on Facebook for the 20 minutes I was in there, And if he couldn't give me a ride, I would walk to get to the comic book store. Now, thanks to Google Maps, I know that I was walking 1.5 miles each way to get comics, right? So those reading materials weren't considered real reading when I was a kid, when we were all kids. And I'm just so grateful that kids today have educators and grown-ups in their lives that can welcome our books, graphic novels, comics, and validate those kids, because I know that I'd be a much more confident reader today if I had more adults in school saying, hey, that's great that you're reading that Garfield Treasury, you know.
Jeff, kids, in my experience, love to read. All kids, boys and girls both, love to read series. Well, you've created a series, and you created a hybrid, a format that's not quite graphic novel, not quite straight narrative. So talk about that. And were you a reader as a child?
I was a reader as a kid. I started off by reading my father's Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck comic books. He collected them in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And then when he went to Vietnam, his parents threw out all his comics, right? I told that to some kids the other day, and they booed. And I was like, don't boo my grandparents who are deceased, you know. But then my father recollected all of his comics from his youth as I was growing up. So they were new to me. And so I fell in love with these comics that were written, 30 years before I was born, or more. Is that right? The math, right? So that's what I started with, comics. In fact, that's the best literature. I say that unironically. It's the best storytelling literature that I've ever read is Karl Barks. These stories. And I found out Gene today also loved those comics. So then I graduated to my sister's Judy Blume catalog, right? And I moved right through it. My sister's bedroom was right next to the bathroom, so that was the quickest grab, to grab some literature. I read Freckle Juice, and I read Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. Without Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, there's probably no Greg Heffley. And then I went up the ladder a little bit as my sister got older, got into the coming of age stuff, Blubber, right? And then my friend warned me against Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, right? I still have not read it. I understand it has something to do with punctuation. I don't. Eventually, I got to my own reading. I read. I discovered my own stuff. I bought fantasy novels, the Piers Anthony Xanth novels, and then J.R.R. Tolkien. So then I found and then you stop reading when you go to college. You stop reading for pleasure, and then you get back into it afterwards.
Well, it's interesting you read traditionally books that are considered for girls. You and Jack both
Thanks.
did. You did too?
I read the entire Anne of Green Gables series in 7th grade. In September, we had to read a book per month for the book report for Mrs. Curtis's 7th grade class. And I don't know how or why, but Anne of Green Gables fell into my hands in September, and I liked it. And I'm like, there's more. I need to know what happens next. So for the October book report, I did Anne of Avonlea. And then, it's about her grandkids, right? That's weird, yeah, Rainbow Road or Rainbow Alley or something like that. I read that. And then our school library, I ran out of, the school library had maybe just the first 5 titles, and then I would go to the Worcester Public Library to get, because I was obsessive. I needed to know what would happen next.
All right, but you guys are dispelling a myth that's been long held, that boys won't read about girl characters. Talk about this.
Just the other week, I was in an all-boys school in New York City, and the librarian shared with me that her 4th grade student, he came up to her and he had read all of the Raina Telgemeier graphic novel adaptations of The Babysitter's Club. And he felt like a super sleuth. He was like, Raina did not write these. Some woman named Anne did. And she said, yes, that's true. And he goes, well, where are those books? And it was an all-boys school, so they did not have The Babysitter's Club in their collection. And she had, it was like her first or second year at the school, and the first thing she did, she just went and ordered 5 or 6, and the boy said, could I put a hold on all 6? And at first I said, well, the hold rule is 2, and then she was like, no, okay, well, I'll put all 6 on hold for you. And he ripped through them, and then he got all of his classmates reading them too.
Well, that's what teachers know. It's about presentation. Because I always used to tell a story about my son Jake, who had to read Little House on the Prairie with the whole 3rd grade. And Jake's a hockey player. And his take on Little House on the Prairie was like, is this whole chapter going to be about Pa making a door? And I was like, yep. starts with a tree, and then they're gonna cut it down. And he was just beside himself. It was like, God, there should be like motorcycles and machine guns. I said, yeah, it'd be a little different House on the Prairie. But then I went to a class and told this story in a school, and the teacher was a passionate Little House on the Prairie fan, and all her boys loved it. And so I think it is. It's like having it there, having it available, and not being judgmental about it. Yeah. Which is hard to do because you walk into Toys R Us and there's like the blue aisle and the pink aisle. Yeah. And it's just, it's kind of crushing.
That's true. Gene, have you learned anything on the road?
I mean, I think there are just so many big books now that dispel that myth. You know, there's Hunger Games. There's just in all of Raina's books. Every kid reads those books. Girl readers have been identifying with boy protagonists forever, and I firmly believe that boys are smart enough to do the same thing. You know, within the world of comics, there's this notion that if you have a female superhero in their own title, that it doesn't sell. But then, like, Ms. Marvel blew that out of the water. Ms. Marvel is the first Muslim American superhero to star in a major title for Marvel Comics, and it's like the year she debuted, she was the top. She outsold Spider-Man. That's how well she did. If you all haven't read this book, it's amazing. It's an amazing book, and that book is enjoyed by both boys and girls.
Now, it's also held that boys prefer information, nonfiction, to fiction. Do you hold with that? And certainly, each of you have incorporated memoir, at least, into your fiction.
Well, yeah,
Frank
a piece
Einstein.
of that is true. I mean, but that's the danger of talking about boys reading and girls reading. We're just stereotyping from the get-go, kind of. But in general, I mean, just kind of think of like the books on your side of the bed and your husband/boyfriend's side of the bed.
My husband reads war books.
Yeah, do you read war books? No. See, I think you should join the Gene program. Yeah. Like, read something that's crazy. Or Jeff Kinney on audiobooks, which I think would maybe be my, like...
All right, so you don't hold to it.
No, but I think there's something to that, though, because I've found boys... My own son did that same thing. He said, why would I read a book that was made up? Like, I want to read about real stuff. And that's his take on all of fiction, which he's thrown out the window. And he'll only read informational stuff.
What about historical fiction?
No. That's made up, too.
Jack, you've been mighty quiet over there. I have to ask you this. There's a lot of humor in all of your books, from Norvell to Joey Pigza. Do you think there's a difference in boy humor and girl humor?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I have a satisfying answer to that question. Maybe I do have a funny one, but in Dead-Ended Norvell, there's a lot of death in Dead-Ended Norvell, and I just have a wonderful time writing about the 9 dead old ladies, killing them off one by one, writing the obituaries. But even though Jack is absolutely involved in it, because I use myself as the main character, even though Jack is involved with it, Jack has absolute fear of blood, fear of all of this death. And Bunny Huffer's father is the funeral director. And so she is constantly dragging him down there to uncover some organ in a pan or an eyeball or something that just makes him wither and melt and puke. And she loves doing this to him because she really is tougher than he is. And she gets the humor, and Jack gets the humor, but he doesn't have the bones for it, you know? So there is that. Joey Pigza, of course, you know, he's a very empathetic character, and he loves the woman. His grandmother in it. What granny? She is a fabulous grandmother. I love it. You know, she puts him in the refrigerator. Chill out. And then all of his friends in that book are usually girls. They're all girls, and that becomes a big part of his world. So I think that, you know, he finds them pretty funny, but not only does he find them funny, he finds that their empathy, their love and understanding and care and healing is something that makes him a better person. And he looks to those female characters for love and understanding and finds it there. So maybe he's not looking for the joke in that particular moment, but he's looking to be accepted and loved.